We are all doing creative things all the time. We just may not call them that, right? We may not name it. And that tends to get people sort of willing to move forward in that way. Or just be really honest and say, I know I'm asking you to take a risk. Let's take it. I'll take it with you.
Hi, I'm Danielle DeLeo Kim, Executive Director of Philadelphia 250. In 2026, the country will commemorate the 250th anniversary of American independence. So I invite you to listen in and get inspired to take action as Philadelphia 250 brings together thought leaders and change makers to share what those founding promises mean to them now and in the pursuit to 2026.
Hi, I'm Todd Bressi, and I'm a public art consultant working with Philadelphia 250. I'm here today with Dave Q and Magda Martinez. In today's episode of Philadelphia 250's In the Pursuit series, we'll talk about how artists are working with communities in Philadelphia to explore the idea of the pursuit of happiness. Dave is a socially engaged artist, writer, and project manager. He was born in Seoul, South Korea, and is now based in Philadelphia, where he's worked on projects with Mural Arts Philadelphia, Asian Arts Initiative, and the City of Philadelphia. Magda is Chief Operating Officer of Mural Arts Philadelphia. She's received many awards and fellowships for her work, using art as a tool for community transformation. She's a writer, a vocalist, an educator, and performer whose passion for and belief in the power of the arts began when she was growing up in Puerto Rico. Dave and Magda, welcome. Thanks for joining us today for what's going to be a fascinating conversation. First, could each of you please introduce yourself? Magda, could you start?
Sure. My name is Magda Martinez. I'm presently Chief Operating Officer at Mural Arts, and also identify as a poet in my own creative practice.
Hi, my name is Dave Q. My pronouns are he, him. I'm an artist and writer in Philadelphia, and I'm the Senior Community Programs Manager at Asian Arts Initiative.
Dave, first question's for you. I expect that most people would think that an artist is someone who does painting or sculpture, or in Philadelphia, murals. Can you tell me what it means to be a socially engaged artist and what led you to that work?
I like to use a description that I heard from Ted Purvis, who's an artist educator from Oakland. He said that painters, they'll manipulate paint and brushes to make their artwork, but socially engaged artists use society, people, definitions of ourselves, communities. Those are the materials to make our work. So that's how socially engaged artists differ from more traditional mediums. And just naturally over time, I was given some opportunities with the Social Practice Lab project at the Asian Arts Initiative. I started managing public art projects and just really found myself loving the conversations and disagreements and all those negotiations that happen in order to put art outside. So naturally, I started to make this work as well.
That's terrific. That's great. Magda, socially engaged art is often described as a process that can generate change, bring out change in communities and the people who live there. I'm wondering if you could talk about how that happens and perhaps give me an example of a project you've been involved with.
I think what socially engaged art does is it opens an individual, and therefore if you're working with a group of individuals, that actually they become a community through the process they're going through as well, right? And that change, I think, happens because of the artistic process. I think about it as, it's like once someone allows you to light that pilot light inside of you again, it doesn't go out. You carry it with you, right, throughout the day and what you do next.
I really like that idea of you're lighting a pilot, a pilot light. We all inherently have it within us, but socially engaged art just kind of moves the frame so that people can see that they can be an artist too. I feel like it's not intimidating to be an artist, even though many people think it is. It is just realizing that you have the voice to make those creative statements, to bring in poetry, to bring in creativity, and to express yourself. And I think that's both radical and that's both just a small part of the the suite of things that are necessary for a society to actualize itself and change itself.
Well, the ideas you're bringing up are a good opening to talk about the pursuit of happiness, and they'll help us in the conversation. I'm wondering what that means to you, and how your perspectives on the pursuit of happiness have been shaped by your own life experiences and journeys. Magda, would you like to start?
Would I like to? No. It's a really big question. And I thought about my grandmother um, when I was thinking about this idea of pursuit of happiness. I remember having a conversation with her when I was probably in my 30s or so, where she said, at night, if I go to bed and I know my children are okay and my bills are paid and I've said my prayers, I am good, right? Like those three things for her were her world of happiness, right? She was not just content, but actually happy that those things were true for her. And I feel like that sometimes that grounds me because I think sometimes I can be so overwhelmed by what it should include, this idea of pursuit of happiness. And I think as I've grown older, the pursuit of happiness is in a really, I think, lovely way, more gray, right? That I understand that it can change over time, and that right now my pursuit of happiness is actually, I really love quiet and silence and the ability to just think whatever thoughts I'd like to think during the course of the day. And of course, the other things, right? Like a place to live where I feel safe, right? Some of it goes back to what my grandmother said, right? The fact that I can pay my bills, the fact that my family and I are also safe, right? And an ability to actually help people out if they need it. And in whatever way that I can, my pursuit of happiness, I think, has always included, my own social contract with others, which is I want to make the way easier um, in the present, but also in the future for others, right? I do want to leave the world a better place than I found it.
Dave, what are your thoughts on what the pursuit of happiness means and what's shaped them in your life?
So I had a head start on this, Magda. I've worked on a project around this topic before. The first thing I want to do is pull apart happiness, right? Because when we say the pursuit of happiness today I think our first interpretation is personal happiness. I think that's where our culture is around self-fulfillment, which is a great place to be. I'm not knocking it. But in the context of the Declaration of Independence, that happiness is not selfish. That declaration is a breakup letter with Britain. And we're trying to guarantee our new citizens the opportunity to make our own dang rules. So happiness is not about the individual, but about collectively, for all of us as citizens, how can we together pursue happiness? So I think for us to continue to guarantee the pursuit of happiness for us collectively, I think we are in a moment where we are reckoning with the systemic challenges that face us that continue to prevent everyone from accessing the promises that our founding document has promised. So I think the work right now is to just even learn about what those systemic challenges are, educate ourselves so that we can begin to hope to dismantle any of it. It's become such a complex problem, but I think we're finally at a place where we are recognizing and then being able to act on it.
I think what's important to me about this idea of the pursuit of happiness is the ability for anyone to bring their whole selves wherever they go, right?
I still think about, Magda, the diversity training that we had at Fleischer. And this was, I don't want to age us, but this was a little bit ago, where we did an exercise where we had to write down 5 different ways that we identified ourselves, 5 adjectives that you would use. And after some time, I think the point that the facilitator wanted to make is that, if you defined yourself by race, raise your hand. And there's all the people of color that raised their hands here. And then I think you pointed out also, if you define yourself by gender, raise your hand, right? And none of the men raised their hand. All the women raised their hand into the room. And it was just an incredible insight into what privilege looks like. Privilege looks like not having to think about this one aspect of your identity. You get to exist in the world without those burdens and constraints is something that we, as people of color, have to address in one way, shape, or another. Um, and one that I think we are realizing and starting to dismantle, starting to be more comfortable with, yeah, being all the multiplicity of ourselves, starting to get away from that language of like, I don't even see color, I don't even see race, I don't even see gender. How can you not see any of those things? Because when you start to say those things, you're actually eliminating an important part of myself.
Both of you are talking about the idea of belonging or not belonging. You're talking about it in a political sense, an economic sense, a cultural sense. I'm wondering if there's a way to make a connection in this conversation between the idea of people feeling like they belong, the pursuit of happiness, and the strength of our communities and our society. Is that what community arts is all about? Creating that space for people to belong and through that weaving the kind of society, the kind of community that will help us thrive?
I I think so. I think the desire to belong is strong in every human being, right? It's why we associate ourselves with groups. Um, and I think the sense of belonging, just saying that, like just saying, I belong here, there's power to that, right? And so the power to actually then make art that sits in the public, that is visible to others, is also a way of claiming space, physical, psychological, creative space. Um, and there's a strong sense of power from the creative act, right? That no one can sort of take away from you, right? Once you've once you understand, right? You may be taking a big leap, I probably am. But I believe that once you understand that you can make something that didn't exist before, why does it stop with art, right? Can I then create a community that didn't exist before? Can I create a family that didn't exist before? Um, and so I do think this sense of the creative act and establishing your place where you think you belong and that you have the right to actually create that place of belonging. Just at least for me, it starts to surge through you. Right? It's really hard to hold that back. I hope I'm answering your question, Todd.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's related to the notion that everyone has within them. Someone earlier used the phrase the inner spark, but everyone has within them agency, creative agency, personal agency, political agency. So by learning how to express yourself by any means creatively, if it's through the arts, you learn how to express yourself civically in your neighborhood, your community, in your city. And that's a powerful connection. Dave, have you seen that in your work? For example, the project you referred to, The Pursuit of Happiness, that you organized, I Will Hold You in the Light, for Independence Mall a few years back.
I mean, first of all, Independence Park is an incredible place that hosts people from all over the world. So as we were diving into like what happiness looks like here, we just got so many different interpretations of it. I think we're really struck by an interview with representatives of the Lenni Lenape or Delaware tribe, who were happy to talk about this park, this idea, but otherwise had little to no connection to this park. You know, they were removed from this land generations ago, and they didn't see themselves represented in the history of the park. So that's why I think we really gravitated toward this Quaker saying of "I will hold you in the light." William Penn is a Quaker, so there's a lot of synergy between looking at Quakers and then following that the stream of thinking here. In the Quaker religion, that phrase means "I will pray for you when you are struggling and lift you closer to God." But we felt it had many resonant tones with who we are today. Those interpretations being, you know, I will hold you in love. I see you. I acknowledge you. So the project that we came up with, I will hold you in the light, That was a one-night event where we asked visitors to grab lanterns on their way in, and we set up this kind of like live action interpretation scene in the Rose Garden of Independence Park. But we just stationed all different types of interpretations and visions of happiness. You could hear a musical interpretation by Yolanda Wisher and the Afro Eaters were performing. You could listen to the former assistant chief of Delaware Tribe of Indians performing Lenape drumming and storytelling, or you could stop by the Weckerly's ice cream station and taste what their interpretation of happiness was. But it was saying that like happiness is no one thing, that there's a multiplicity, and we need to be comfortable with that multiplicity. And we're inviting people to do that with us by grabbing these lanterns and literally lighting up the performers as they move through the space.
So Independence Hall, Independence National Park, brings me back to the anniversary that's approaching, the Declaration of Independence. Social justice advocates are fond of quoting or recalling Martin Luther King's statement, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Do you see the upcoming anniversary of the Declaration of Independence as kind of an opportunity to bend that arc a little bit faster?
I like that statement by Dr. King because it shows that the struggle we are involved in is a long struggle, right? This is a generational fight. This is not. There are moments. There are moments and roles for us to step in and move the conversation forward, but we're not responsible for the full arc of this struggle. A critique of that statement, however, is that it preordains justice. That all we have to do is wait long enough, and that eventually the world, the universe will right itself of the wrongs that we are committing. The universe doesn't create justice, we do. So the Declaration, I think, it's an incredible moment to reflect on what the ideals of the country were. Those ideals are still relevant today, but it's also a reminder that the work of justice is up to us. The more of us that choose not to stand for the injustice, that choose to educate, engage, and participate in all the processes, and also critique the processes. The more of us that choose to do that, that choose to take the call to arms that is the Declaration of Independence, the faster that arc will bend. And if all of us actually choose to engage, then it will be fast enough, right?
David made me think of something, which was, I had this professor in college who I still aspire to grow up to be, right? Very knowledgeable woman.
We all do.
And she said, history doesn't repeat itself, it insists. Don't let people tell you history repeat itself. It will insist until there is resolution, right? But each and every time it comes to it with a different set of people under different circumstances. So there is change, right? In terms of that bending of the arc, yes. I actually think I don't know if it'll be fast enough, but I do believe it's gaining momentum. And I think what's important is to keep people moving forward and not falling into the pattern of the way it's been. This is the way it's always been. People always say this stuff and nothing changes. Right? That's really more my concern. And I think, what this Declaration, the Constitution are, that there's a lot possibly even strange or wrong about the people who actually created those, under what circumstances, right? It was just men, not women. The pursuit of happiness was their happiness, right? Life, liberty, property was their life, liberty, and property. But I think the beautiful thing about it is it's also broad enough to now include people that were not being considered when it was written.
You both spoke evocatively about the connection between individual voice, individual agency, individual happiness, and how that can translate into building stronger, more resilient, more just communities and society. Do you have any suggestions for our audience about what they can do next, about how they can connect their own creative voice with their own creative voices in the pursuit of happiness? Dave, do you have thoughts about that?
I mean, quite simply, my suggestion would be to make art. That certainly comes from a biased opinion. I'm an artist. I believe in the liberating power of art. but I think I think there's something magical to the just allowing yourself the agency to make art, even if you're just figure drawing, even if you're just doing any type of creative writing, any type of practice. It doesn't have to be socially engaged art. I think anything that reaches into yourself, acknowledges yourself, and respects the individual you are, and then puts that out there. I think is exciting and necessary for us to realize ourselves as a community. We need individuals who have realized themselves as well. And I'll quote Howard Thurman here, who's an African American civil rights leader. He said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. The more of us that understand who we are and what we need, the more we will start to make those demands and start to see the systems that support us change to meet those demands."
That was wonderful. Magda, what advice would you give to people about how they can connect their own drive for
But
happiness?
Dave is like, that's a great place to end. Um, I think my advice, in many ways, what we're talking about is storytelling, right? Telling your story, owning your story. Tell your story, right? Own your story, all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly, the warts. Claim your voice, right? And your story is part of your voice. And share it with others and encourage them to tell their stories, right? It's a way of knowing. It's a way of knowing yourself and knowing the people around you. I'm also biased
I
because I
appreciate that
am a writer.
advice. I appreciate that advice very much. Very much. Dave and Magda, I want to thank you both for this conversation today. You both know how much I value you as colleagues, and I'm sure this is not going to be the last conversation we have about this. And I'm hopeful both of you can stay with us in the journey over the next few years to the anniversary and beyond. For now, I'll thank you again. This is Todd Bressi for Philadelphia 250.
I would hope that by 2026, there will be a way for all of us to connect with each other across cultures, across traditions, across languages, across religions, using food as the catalyst.